Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking Editor Tom McKenna. Joining me today, as always, our Executive Art Director Mike Pekovich.
What's up, guys?
And Senior Editor Matt Kenny.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Matt.
Yay. Hey, before we get started, I'd like to remind all of our listeners to spread the word about Shop Talk Live. Drop by our iTunes page and leave a comment and prop us up with a generous star rating if you so desire. Remember, you can also find us at iHeartRadio. And don't forget to check out our website for our exciting tool giveaway for Fine Woodworking's 40th anniversary. We're giving away 40 great tools, but you have to enter for each one. We'll be starting the sweepstakes next week. To enter, go to finewoodworking.com/40 sweeps, and that's the number 40, finewoodworking.com/40 sweeps. Let's prime the pump for this week's episode by talking about something that happened today. A lot of folks may not realize that we also actually put out a magazine, and today we shipped an issue, and it's also Donut Day, which is very exciting.
Yes.
You know, we got to pump us up with some sugar to make the deadline.
Yeah, every time we send an issue to the printer, it's Donut Day.
Yes, it's a fun time.
Yeah.
And there's also Halloween candy, so we're all amped up on sugar. And as you guys know, we have an article in this issue by Windsor chairmaker Peter Galbert, and it's quite a departure from a topic that we've covered before. And one of the things that Peter likes to do is make wooden spoons for fun, and it's a cool way for him to get away from the complexity of Windsor chairmaking and just to kind of go for a walk in the woods and grab a branch and start carving.
Yeah, I mean, I've been familiar with Peter's work for a long time. He does fantastic chairs, wrote a book on making Windsor chairs, and he probably wasn't the first guy I would think of to sort of head out on his back porch, get out his Whitland knives and make some spoons, but his spoons are really nice. They're very simple. They're, have the facets of the tool marks and everything, but, they really demonstrate his eye for design. They're really elegant. And
Very nice, yeah.
makes me want to go carve a spoon.
You know what?
Yeah.
Spoon carving is very popular now. If you go on the Instagram.
On the Instagram?
On the Instagram.
Tons of people are making spoons and selling spoons. Really popular thing to do right now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, and like I said, it's something we haven't covered in, I don't know, since I've been at the magazine, so it's been a long, long time.
Yeah, and unlike, making a coffee table, the startup in terms of tools, you need a couple straight knives and a hook knife and maybe an axe, so you could probably get that at your hardware store if you want.
Yeah.
And some firewood.
The axe is my favorite part.
Another good thing about spoon carving is that it's not pin turning. That's a one. So there you go. As long as you're not pin turning, you're doing pretty well.
Spoon carving. It's not pen turning. I like that. I like that.
I wonder if we're going to get some angry emails about that.
No, just some comments directed toward you.
Yeah, pin turning is actually tremendously popular too.
It is.
It is
Yeah.
unbelievably popular.
Except when we did it as an article, project article
bombed.
once before, it didn't do well. So
It's just not popular with our readers.
So apparently,
Exactly.
Peter sent in a whole collection of spoons in order for us to photograph them for the article.
Yep.
And we've been getting calls from Peter. Are you guys done with those spoons yet? And it turns out he took them out of his kitchen, and folks at home were a little upset because they didn't have any spoons to use in the kitchen. So
That's a shame.
sorry, Peter. We'll get those spoons back to you as soon as possible.
They're in the mail.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on, shall we? Let's get to some questions. The first up is one from Mike Donaldson of Woodbury, Minnesota. And he says, Shop Talk Gents. In issue 249, you have an article about the double-duty outfeed table that also serves as a workbench. Then in Tools and Shops, you feature the shaker workbench, neither of which has any dog holes. I can't think of anything aside from marking, assembly, and finishing that I could use my benchtop for without using some form of work-holding apparatus, typically a holdfast. To make a short question long, what good is a workbench without dog holes?
Well, first of all, we're all cat people. I never use dog holes ever, and I make furniture all the time, and I use things like planing stops.
Yep.
Saw hooks,
Yep.
shooting boards. all things that can be either hooked over the front edge of the bench or clamped into my front vise.
Yes.
Yep.
And one of the features that both the benches that Mike mentioned are conspicuously lacking, neither one of them has an end vise. And bench dogs are typically used in conjunction with an end vise to clamp boards securely for doing all kinds of stuff. And because they don't have end vises, there really isn't a need for the bench dogs per se. If you want to add a hole or two for a hold fast, that's cool. I actually have a dog hole opposite my front vise on the other edge of my workbench, just so I have a little T-square plane stop. I'll
Yes.
clamp one end in the vise and the opposite little end of the blade registers against that bench dog. But that's about it.
Yeah, I have 3 holes for a hold fast. One of them is so that I can clamp something down over one of the legs and chop directly over the leg.
Cool.
I almost never use it. The other 2 are in line, sort of perpendicular to the jaw of my twin screw vise, and that's so that I can put a stop in there and plane against that stop and have it supported not only by the clamped in the vise, but also have 2 hold fast. Just the bar of it pressing against the bar.
All right.
You don't even need to put a hold, knock it down with the hold fast. And
Yeah.
I also have on my bench on the end where the face vise is, I have a big stop built into the end of the bench. That's the full width of the bench, and so I can.
So that is your plane stop.
Yeah.
there.
I use that some. I also, with all my small stuff that I make, I have a lot of small stops.
Micro stops.
Micro stops that usually involve a piece of plywood, an 1/8-inch thick stop glued to it,
Yeah.
and either a cleat that gets clamped in the vise or a hook that gets hooked over the front edge of the bench. But I will say this: if you do a lot of hand work, you might need more holes for hold fast.
Yeah. I have a pretty rudimentary bench, but I have a bunch of dog holes in front of my face vise or front vise. I thought I'd use them more often. I've got a bunch of bench dogs in there, but I do rarely use them. I do use one of the Veritas planing stops as a planing stop. I don't have many
those are actually pretty
ready-made
cool.
ones.
Yeah.
So I use the dog holes primarily for that, but otherwise.
That's with that sort of thin plate,
Yep.
1/4-inch thick, or it's actually slightly less than 1/4 inch, and it has the 2 posts that slide along
Yep.
the plate.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of those guys as well, so I do have a dog hole, a pair of dog holes at that front vise location for those guys.
Yeah, and I occasionally use a hold fast in those holes, but
I think the one thing is you don't need a Swiss cheese bench
right.
Yeah.
with a bunch of holes in it for dogs and all that kind of stuff. And I don't even have a tail vise, so I'm definitely not going to have a row of dog holes along the front apron like you see on a lot of traditional benches.
Right.
Yeah, I think the answer from Mike is probably, hey, if you want dog holes, go ahead, have
Sure.
at it.
Yeah.
So
Yes. So it's a bench without dog holes is actually quite a lot of good. Mr. Donaldson.
take that. All right. Hey, it's time for our all-time favorite tools of the week.
All right.
Who's up?
Who's going to go first? Mike's got one.
All right.
Mike's got one in his head.
It's
It's
very
have one.
it's disappointing.
going to be
but
good.
One of the best tools of all time of the week, I would have to say. So I like to cook, and I treat my culinary utensils in the kitchen exactly like I treat my tools in the shop. So when we got married, I basically traded in half of our wedding gifts to get a good set of chef's knives that I still have, and I keep them really sharp. So I've just gone through.
How unbelievably tacky. I'm just kidding. Go on.
I didn't tell anybody. There's certain people we couldn't invite over for a few years because they'd be looking for that
Right.
crystal vase on the counter, and
The
it
dog's
wasn't
out
there.
of the bag, right?
Yeah. So I'd just gone through like my third toaster in a year and a half, and I didn't want to spend any more money on a cheap toaster. So I wanted like just a killer bomb-proof industrial toaster. Didn't want to go to Williams-Sonoma and spend, way over my budget. So I went to my local restaurant supply place where they have a lot of used, awesome like deep fryers, big old grills, those giant mixers they have in
Hobart's.
and
Yes.
for like bakeries and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like everything you could ever want in opening your own restaurant, they've got it there. So they had this really awesome toasters, really cheap. Same one at Williams Sonoma for $300. They had it for like $99.
Because it was used.
Well, actually, these were brand new in the box. The only thing is there was no plug on the end of the cord, which is weird. But they said, no, that's the way they come from the factory. So I put my money down, brought this thing home. I went to Home Depot, got a cord. I got a plug for the cord, attached it, plugged it in. It turned on, but it took a really long time for the toast to toast. Like, it got warm, but it wasn't browning. And by the time the toast got brown, it was like dry and hard as a rock. There was something going on here. So I thought, maybe I have the wrong plug for the cord. So I flipped over the toaster and to look at the little voltage stuff. It was a 220 volt toaster.
Nice.
It was like the most awesome thing in the world. Like, it out toastered me. It's like, you want a good toaster? Here you go. 220 volts. Mm-hmm. So in my shop, I got 220 volt table saw, bandsaw, joiner, planer, and toaster.
That's right. It's your shop toaster.
So for about 5 seconds, I thought, maybe I'll just keep it in my shop. Just like toast all my toast out there. So I took it back to this place. I said, what's the deal? I can't use this. It's 220 volt. And they said, is this for your house? I said, yeah. They go, like, why? I said, because it's an awesome toaster. And they just look at me, and they kind of rummaged around for the back, and they did find a used one that was 110. And it works perfectly. And it's this big old, and I like is on the box it says for commercial use only.
And it goes to 11.
Yes. So that's my toaster. It's a 4-slice Dualic commercial toaster for commercial use only.
I think in our next podcast, Mike is going to give us some tips on how to do sand shading in a toaster.
Oh, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
So I'm brand new to the Instagram. If you go to my Instagram page, you can see my toaster. I posted a picture of it.
And your Instagram page is not about woodworking.
It's all about woodworking and my toaster.
And toasters.
Only woodworking.
Yeah.
So that's
Awesome.
it.
That's it.
My toaster.
Well, here's something I just realized when you told that story that you didn't, I don't think you told me, I heard the first time you told it to me, is that if you go and buy a piece of something that has to be plugged in, right? Yeah. They fall into two categories. The kind that come with plugs, and those are always 110 volt.
Yes.
And the kind that do not come with plugs, and those are always 220 volts.
So far, that logic holds.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Matt's tool tip of the week.
That's right. Because 220 outlets they're so varied in what they are. That's why they never give you a plug.
I guess so.
In 110, it's pretty much all the same. There's a few that are different, but the standard one is standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Anyways, is it my turn?
If you like.
Okay. So my favorite tool this week is one that I've been using more and more recently, although I've always used it a lot since I've been at the magazine, and that is the Shop's drum sander.
Yes. Old Performax.
It is an old Performax drum sander, a 1632 model, and I love it because a lot of the boxes I make and have very thin sides, like 3/16.
Yeah.
And once you get under a 1/4 inch with most benchtop planers,
Except for my planer.
yes, but yours is not a benchtop planer. Oops, pardon me.
So yeah, point taken. So this thing handles really thin stock.
It handles really thin stock. So it just goes through there. You get no snipe. You get no tear out, nothing. So it's great for figured wood as well. And I also use it whenever I make shops on veneers because those are less than a 16th inch thick.
Right.
And there's no way you can send that through.
Even my planer, yeah.
Yeah. Or, even, I should say less than an 1/8 of an inch thick. All my shops on veneers are. So I use it for that all the time. And I'm going to have to save up and get one for myself.
Yeah, most people around here don't like it because they try to use it like a planer and hog off like a 16th of an inch of stock.
Yeah, and you can't.
It's not working.
It's really slow, but it does work really, really well.
It does really work well. There are some issues with drum sanders that are a pain in the neck. Traditional design is that you're supposed to adjust the head to be parallel to the platen, which is kind of a pain in the neck. There's now Supermax, which are the people that I believe that used to own Performax before they sold it to Jet. They have a new model out where the head is always it's cast. the head has a cast body, so it never moves. You adjust the bed parallel to the head.
Right.
But also, it's a pain in the butt to put the paper on the head and keep it tight. So there are some finicky things to look out for when you're using one. But once you know what those are, you can actually get really great results from a sander like that.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those tools where if it's in your own shop, you take care of it, you keep it tuned up, it's going to fare much better and perform much better than getting abused
by the guys from Fine Home Building
in a public shop.
I once went in there and a guy from Home Building was sending a piece of concrete through it
with nails in it.
with nails in it. Yeah,
Awesome.
So,
Hey, well, I have my tool. My favorite all-time tool of the week is a rasp and file set. It's funny, when I first started working at the magazine, I hadn't really used a rasp or file since my 9th grade woodworking class where I shaped a whale.
Awesome.
And
I did a shark.
it's funny. It's funny because I never, in the past year, I'd been making boxes and kind of smaller projects that the idea of setting up a router to make, pulls and handles and things like that just didn't appeal to me. And
Right.
I thought it would take longer to get set up to make something that I'm still going to have to revise anyway. So I went to Lowe's first and I bought some Nicholson rasps, and they're kind of cheap and they worked really well at hacking away at rough material, but I always had to do a lot of sanding.
Right.
And last year there was, and it's sort of an unfortunate thing, but it was a good thing for me. A local woodworker had passed away, and he had a shop full of tools and materials that that his family was selling. And I came across these Italian rasps.
Oh.
They're the Karate brand, and I don't know
karate.
Karate, Corrida, I believe.
Not karate.
No, not karate.
Not like high karate.
No.
The wonderful aftershave.
But these things are super fun. I got a bunch of different sizes, and it takes very little cleanup to get the shape perfected. And I got these things at a super bargain. I mean,
The thing about rasps and files, but rasps in particular, if they are what's called hand stitched, and there's some irregularity in them, that eliminates
a lot of tear out.
a lot of tracks and tear out, and it minimizes the amount of sanding or whatever you'll have to do later,
Right.
because the placement of the teeth is so random.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between the Nicholson ones I bought at the big box store, excuse me, and these Italian ones. They have a lot better cut to
Very
them.
cool.
And it's a lot of fun to just kind of scrape away at wood and shape it the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's
All
me.
right.
We
Just
moving
see
on?
Tom in his basement with like a piece of 16-quarter ebony, and he's just like,
Dad, what are you doing down there?
he comes out later with a little handle like this.
Little drawer pull.
A 5-pound log turned into a 1-ounce.
I did it all with rasp and files.
You look like a coal miner covered in ebony dust.
Except for the white, I wear the mask around my face and I'll have a little
Right.
bit of whiteness there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's all fun. What a picture. Let's get back to some more questions. This one is from Jason Burt. No location given. Jason writes, my wife gave me a spokeshave as a gift last Christmas. I very much appreciate the gift, but I am saddened because I can't get it to work very well. The spokeshave has a curved bottom. I've tried to make sure the blade is nice and sharp, up to 8,000 grit on a Shapton stone, but I still can't get it to take nice, clean, smooth shavings. Well,
when I first got my spokeshave, I actually got a pair of spokeshaves. I got one with the flat bottom. I assumed I'd use that for outside curves, and one with a rounded bottom that I assumed I was going to use that for inside curves. Turns out I use the flat bottom spokeshave 99% of the time, because even on inside curves, it's a lot easier to use. It's got that really, really short sole, but on inside curves, why I like that is the front and back edges of that sole will contact the workpiece, and you just extend the blade down until you're making a cut. So you really have sort of a 3-point geometry there, the front and back. On a curved sole spokeshave, if that curve is a tighter radius than the curve that you're shaving, there's really no stable bearing surface, and your technique has to be really, really good. And you can dial that in. What you want to do is you want to start the cut on the front sole ahead of the blade. And then as you're making the cut, you don't want to grip it in the palms of your hands. You want to sort of pinch the spokeshave on either side of the blade between your fingers and your thumbs, and you have much better rotational control over the tool. And you basically want to, in essence, roll the tool back, lowering the blade into the cut, and you're bearing on the sole ahead of the blade and then the blade. And as you can imagine, this takes a little bit more finesse. The blade has to be set for really, really light cut. And then once you get your technique down, it's really important to pay attention to the direction of the grain when you're spoke shaving. You always want to be working downhill. So on an inside curve, typically you're starting on the ends of the board working toward the center. And on an outside curve, you're typically starting in the center of the board working each direction away down towards each end of the board.
Downhill.
What you said about using a flat sole on the inside curve
Yep.
actually reminds me of something else related to what Tom was just talking about, which is where I learned that principle was with a file or a rasp on the inside curve. You don't use a half round.
Oh.
You use a flat rasp, and you get 2 points of contact, and it's easier to keep the curve fair
Interesting.
by
Very cool.
using a flat rasp or flat file to clean it up.
Yeah, when I had done a tool review with Chris Gochner, and it was on spoke shaves.
You
and
you reviewed Chris Gochner
I did.
as a tool.
No.
Did he get a 5-star rating?
Let me clarify. Chris Gochner had done a tool review that I edited, and when I was out photographing it, this was on spoke shaves, and we had focused the article on flat bottom shaves because we surmised that it was the better tool for, a lot of folks. But he had gotten some round bottom ones from manufacturers, and he kept trying to show me how to use it, man. And it was a bear because, the flat bottom, like Mike was saying, it's easy to get a registration point and figure out where you're at. But with the round bottom ones, man, just trying to figure out where to start and get the pivot right and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I was having fits, so I don't own a round bottom shave.
Didn't Queen have a song called Flat Bottom Shaves?
Possibly. There is one benefit to the round bottom shave if you get your technique down, and that is because you're riding on the front of the sole, and then you're sort of adjusting the depth of cut through the lateral motion of the way you hold it. It's going to take a consistent depth cut whether you're going on the inside of a curve or an outside of a curve. On a flat bottom spoke shave, you're going to have to adjust the depth of the cut because on an inside curve where the front and back of the sole are contacting, that blade has to extend down a certain bit in order to cut the wood. If you then go and cut an outside curve there, that blade is going to be sticking out way, way too much. So you just have to, that's why I like a spoke shave where my depth adjustment is really fast and really precise. That's why I like a spoke shave with the twin adjusters as opposed to something I got to tap with a hammer.
Yeah. All right. I think we've answered the question. Well, maybe not. I guess the answer is he's going to have to practice and kind of get the feel for that shave, or maybe go out and invest in a flat bottom shave and start that way. We did have a couple questions about right versus left tilt table saws, and whoa, that was not a table saw. That was my file. And we have one that I think can answer both guys. Scott Lynch of Madison, Wisconsin writes, I'm considering replacing my right tilt contractor saw with one of the well-reviewed small cabinet saws featured in the magazine, which is left tilt. At present, I don't cut a lot of bevels on wide stock, which seems like the big advantage of left tilt, and it's heavily counterbalanced by the convenience of cursor accuracy on right tilt saws. Can you weigh the pros and cons? Interesting thought. I have a right tilt saw, and I remember the first time I was making a cabinet, and I wanted to put a wide bevel on the bottom edge, and I think I was kind of a rookie, and I didn't really understand the benefit of a right versus left tilting saw. And what I had to do was completely change my order of work and move to the left side of the saw. And I built this tall fence and made some kind of a contraption to try it, and I just felt like I was going to die because it was just completely working using my left hand, pushing the workpiece through.
Oh yeah, you're on the wrong side of the saw. It's
and
really
I'm trying
tricky.
to, exactly. I'm trying to balance this, at least 3x3 workpiece on the saw, and I was just like, what am I doing? And I was violating the basic code of if something doesn't feel right, don't do it.
Yeah.
But I did it, and I survived, but I vowed I would never do that again. So I think the next saw I get will certainly be a left tilt.
I have a right tilt saw because it's just an old saw, and it doesn't really present problems to me at all. Occasionally, I'll need to rip a bevel onto a long edge, and then I just have to slide my fence over to the left-hand side of the blade. But I think that I would want to reframe the question that Scott is asking. Because he says, okay, well, what's the benefit of the benefit of a right tilt versus a left tilt? And he only mentions two things: never having to adjust your cursor,
Right.
which is nice, and then he says left tilt, which is the bevel issue, which is nice. But then he says he's thinking about getting one of the brand new cabinet saw, one of the ones we just reviewed in the magazine, and I think that the cursor adjustment is such a small thing if you're talking about a brand new cabinet saw, because that brand new cabinet saw will also have a riving knife, a really good blade guard. It will have good dust collection. It'll have a whole other mess of things, which a right tilt saw, because right tilt saws really haven't been made in a while.
Right. Probably has a
So-
better fence.
It
unless you
probably
have
has a
an
better
aftermarket
fence, has so much else that's in its favor that when weighed against all of that stuff, the fact that your cursor may need to becomes a problem, but it's really only a problem if you switch from a thin kerf to standard kerf blades all the time, which just don't do that, and then it's not really an issue.
Yeah.
And if you put a dado set in, well, any saw, well, I guess a right tilt still works.
No, even still,
Yeah.
because the width of the carbide cutter,
Right.
I don't trust, unless I've got my standard combination blade
You
in
don't
the saw.
trust it. Anyways,
I don't trust a cursor.
Yeah,
anymore.
I
never-
always measure.
Yeah, I never use the cursor. Even on the big saw in our shop, I don't trust the cursor. I just measure. It's just,
Yep,
it's
with
the way I
a
saw
steel
it.
rule.
Yeah, I've, like you guys, I have a right tilt saw, old Delta Unisaw, but almost everywhere I teach and at the shop at work, I work on a left tilt saw. And the answer is it's no big deal. It's easy to get used to. The biggest pain switching back and forth between right and left tilt saws is the power switches. It always seems to be on the opposite side of the saw. So you're reaching down and
Yeah.
not finding it. It's not that big of a deal. Don't worry if the thing that's stopping you is that you have a right tilt saw and you're kind of freaked out that if you get a left tilt saw you won't like it. It's just about a non-issue, not enough to worry. And as Matt said, there's a lot of good things about upgrading to a new saw, especially a saw with a riving knife, that far outweigh anything, any cursor
Yeah.
accuracy things you'll get with the left tilt saw.
Right.
So go for it.
And he mentioned the contractor, that he's got a contractor
Oh, yeah.
saw, which doesn't, I'm sure has an open base. And so,
Yeah.
these
Oh,
the
yeah.
newer cabinet saws have, enclosed bases and cabinets and great dust collection. So it's an upgrade no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, the power, vibration, just the fact that the trunnions are mounted to the base instead of the tabletop. It's going to be a lot easier to dial that thing in and get your miter slots lined up just right.
Yeah, I just went past me that he currently owns a contractor saw. In which case, what are you thinking about? Just get rid of it.
Hey, that's what I own.
I mean, because I'm thinking I've got a right tilt cabinet saw.
Yeah.
And I could see maybe debating that a little bit for like 5 minutes. But if you have a contractor saw and you're able to get any cabinet saw, there's no advantage at all to having the contractor saw.
I like my contractor saw. No, I really don't.
Just
No,
get
it's fine.
Get rid of that.
I have a really nice bandsaw now, so I do a lot of my ripping on the bandsaw. But it's still good for joinery.
Oh, yeah.
My contractor saw, it just blows dust everywhere.
Yeah, there's no problem with the contractor saw, but he's talking about
It's an
should I
upgrade.
get a cabinet saw or maybe not because it's not right tilt. It's like, what are you, crazy? No, get a cabinet saw.
I would upgrade to one of those smaller cabinet saws in a second if I had the budget for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
You're the editor of Fine Woodworking. You don't have the...
What?
Just
I just bought some chisels, so
It's-
I got to send some kids to college too. So that's another thing I got to worry about.
Everyone thinks that the editors at Fine Woodworking have just endless tool budgets and crazy amount of tools in our shops, and only Mike does.
Only Mike does, and he has a toaster.
And he has a toaster. in his shop
220
now.
volt
Nice.
toaster,
All right.
3-phase.
Well, let's move on to another question. This one is from Ryan Horschman, and Ryan says, "I'm having some maple trees taken down on my property, and I'm planning on having somebody come in with a portable sawmill to mill these trees into lumber. Do you have any advice on how much I should have cut into what sizes or types of cuts, i.e., rift versus quarter sawn, 4-quarter, 8-quarter, or even 12-quarter? Should I have stuff cut larger to account for loss in final milling? What should I be thinking about in terms of drying time? I'm sure a lot of these things depend on the type of projects I have in mind. I'm hoping to do some casework without the plywood. I do have the tools to handle rough lumber, so that isn't a concern. Thanks for any advice you can give." And I think we talked a little bit about this before, and it sounded like Matt had some really good answers.
Well, I hope
Matt
they're
always has really good answers.
Some snarky, some not so snarky.
good. So first, I would know 4-quarter. I mean, assuming you have a bandsaw. I mean, he says he has this stuff. So if you have a bandsaw with reasonable resaw capacity, no 4-quarter, because you can make 4-quarter yourself later. So what I would do, and if it's just like I'm getting this cut up, it's not for a specific thing. And if it were for a specific piece of furniture or something, I might know that I need this cut and this size and all that. But if it's just cutting it up for future use for whatever, I think from the center of the tree, I would cut everything through and through, which just means you're just cutting slices off of it.
Right.
And so I'd cut it through and through. From the center of the tree, I would want maybe a 12-quarter piece.
Right at the pith.
Right at the pith.
Yeah.
Maybe even 16-quarter.
Hmm.
But we'll get to that because that's a drying issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Then everything else, I think I would go 8-quarter. And you do have to make it a little bit thicker than the final dimension you're after. So if you're after 8-quarter, you might need to actually cut it at more like 9-quarter. And as it dries, it'll shrink a little bit in thickness. So that's what I would do, just through and through, a big chunk from the middle. And that big piece in the middle actually will give you, it'll be almost all rift sawn or quarter sawn. Pretty much the whole thing will be, except right in the middle at the pith.
Right.
And then everything else will be 8-quarter, and you can resaw it and get whatever you want from it later on. So
Yeah, I think
once it
that's
dries.
great advice. The only thing I'd say, if you know you're going to be making, a case piece or a tabletop or something, and you have these nice wide boards that you may not be able to resaw, I'd say if you want something thinner than 8-quarter, maybe go to like a heavy 5-quarter, but certainly don't go 4-quarter because it's
Right.
going to shrink and warp, and you're going to end up with almost nothing usable of width or great length.
Yeah. If you know that you want to make a tabletop and you need boards that are X by X and this thick, you should just get them milled up so that when they dry, all you have to, you're not doing any more resawing or anything like that.
Right. Now, maple, I know folks have issues with sticker stains. It's those black stains at the stickers, especially in maple that has a high sugar content.
Mm-hmm.
What have you heard about that? How do you get rid of those guys?
I think what you can do is instead of using a wood for the sticker, you could go and buy some of those synthetic decking boards or planks. I think they're called Trex or something.
Yep.
Trex might be a
Trex
brand
brand.
name.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can cut those up and make stickers out of them. And I believe that will eliminate sticker stain. I think also, I'll say that. I know that we did it once as a Q&A, and that's what was recommended, was getting some of those synthetic things like that to use to make. And that's what I believe. You can actually buy stickers that are made from that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you Google, I think if you just Google sticker, like wood drying sticker or something like kiln sticker, you'll probably find, I don't know if you'll be able to buy them though, if you're just a dude, you might have to be a company.
Just a dude. Yeah.
Wholesale. You might only be able to buy them wholesale or business to business. And in terms of drying time, the generic rule of thumb is 1 year for each inch.
Right.
But the thicker it gets, the less accurate that is. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
You mean longer or shorter?
longer.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it takes longer. So for 8-quarter, I would say 2 years. You should be ready to go.
Yeah, but you still have to bring it inside, let it acclimate inside
Yes.
the shop too, and all that fun stuff. And it's funny. I was just up at Garrett Hack's farm, and he mills a lot of his own lumber, and I learned something that I didn't really think about before. In talking about usable lumber from a log and where, the usable wood really is for furniture making, and I was shocked how small amount of wood is usable on a tree. He basically said it's, just above the root to where the first branches start
Yes.
popping out. And
That's
I was shocked, and I was like, really? That doesn't seem like a lot. So just another tip, I guess, if you're new to this, you don't want the thin stuff above that first row of branches.
Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, the other stuff, like if there could be a nice
Secondary
crotch,
wood. Yeah.
limbs and so forth tend to be considered reaction woods, and you don't want to make furniture from them. At least traditional furniture, I'm sure you could do something with it. You could maybe turn with it. I know guys do turn with limb wood, so you could turn with it. But
make a spoon.
Make some stick
you could make
furniture.
spoons. You could make stick furniture. But yeah, in terms of usable lumber, it's normally everything up to the first limbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might get lucky. You might have 80 feet of that on a big tree, or
Yep.
it might
Yep.
only be 10 feet or 8 feet.
Hey, we did a great article on drawing your own lumber back in 2009, our March-April issue, and it's issue number 204 if you want to go back and dive in to get some information on how to stack and cover and take care of the wood as it dries.
Yeah. Another thing you can do with really thick stuff, if you want to speed up the drying, let's say you need some legs and you need 12-quarter lumber for that. So I would let it dry for maybe a year or so outside or whatever, and then cut out billets that are closer to your final dimensions and bring those in,
Right.
and those will dry quicker. And
Sure.
then the big old honking piece of big old slab will dry.
Yeah.
So you can speed up the drying that way. And the other thing to do, if you have enough of it, look for a local sawmill that might have its own kiln, and then they'll kiln dry it. We did that once.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, do you guys want to talk about technique? Is that
Our
something we
favorite
want
tool,
to
our favorite technique of
favorite
all time this
technique
week?
of all time this week? I have to back out because I'm in marching band hell right now, so I don't have much time in the shop lately.
Does
But,
your favorite technique involve sourdough bread in a toaster?
I do have a very specific technique for the order of toasting. It involves preheating your toaster before you put the toast in, but that is not my favorite technique of the week. I'll let you go first, though, because you have a little show and tell guide.
I hope you're joking about the preheating of the toaster.
That's no joke.
Oh, jeez. Mike, you're broken. All right. So my technique is actually something I learned from Philip Lowe this summer when I was teaching a class. And it's awesome. Usually when I make up a box, and this is actually part of a box I'm making right now.
So you got a little miter box, almost 4 inches square.
It's 3.5 inches square, a little mitered box. And normally tape is enough to get nice tight miters. There's a way that you can, when you're putting the pieces on the tape, and it makes it really tight so that when you fold it all up, the tape really stretches and pulls things tight. This particular stuff had kind of cupped a little bit, so it wasn't closing up at the top and the bottom. And I remembered the little technique I had learned from Phil this summer, which involves a piece of string.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I'm using some hemp twine. And what you do is it should be long enough to loop around twice.
And it's still on there. It's looped around, and it's still pretty loose.
It's kind of loose.
That's not holding anything in place, man.
Right. So it's not. So then the other part of this technique are just some little pieces of wood.
Okay.
And these go inside.
They're
quarter by
sticks.
quarter.
It doesn't matter how big they are, because what you can do is always adjust the length of your string to accommodate them. So
Now, I'm sorry. Do the sticks have to be as long as the box is tall?
It's a good idea because then what we'll end up doing is getting clamping pressure along the whole joint. If they're short, then you won't get clamping pressure along the whole joint.
All right, so for the listening audience, Matt is inserting 2 sticks on each side underneath the 2 winds of string vertically.
And he's not smiling. He's very serious about this.
I'm concentrating.
He is. He looks a little nervous. He's putting them in. Oh, the 4 side things are getting tight, so he's kind of putting them in more toward the center of the side and then sliding them toward the corners.
Yeah, so you put them all in towards the center, and then you slide them out towards the corner. And what this does is tighten up the string and also puts pressure on the corner joint.
Huh.
And that pulls the joint together tight. And you can also do things like spread here the string is sort of stuck in the middle.
Right.
You can spread it out so it's top and bottom, and that does even better.
Cool.
And if you get them out here and it's a little loose, like this is now, it's a little loose, you can always just take one of them and turn it. See, these are not square sticks. They're kind of rectangular.
Right.
So I can just turn one of them vertical or turn it so the higher side is up, and you can get more pressure.
Cool. So the sticks are, let's say they're sort of on one face a quarter, the other maybe 3/8 of an inch.
Yeah, something like that.
So you start with the short sides and flip them to the wide side if you need to.
Yep. And
Cool.
you just pull them out, and it puts it'll tighten up any miter like that.
Ah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
I like that.
we had a method of work that was similar. I think it was for a frame miter where the guy was using dowels
Oh, yeah.
along a band clamp.
All right.
So
Yeah.
same principle.
Yeah, same principle, exactly. These are nice, though, because this is nice because you have these flat surfaces on the little sticks that are going to put clamping pressure, especially once you get the string spread out like that, top and bottom. You can even loop it around 3 times, and then you get one in the middle, one at the top, one
Cool.
at the bottom. And it just puts that nice, even clamping pressure along the whole joint, and you end up with really nice, tight miters.
Nice.
So it worked great on these little boxes that I'm making right now.
All right.
So
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a technique that I've heard about for a while. It's the first time I put it in use. I'm making a little box, and the lid is made in 2 panels, and the 2 panels are hinged together. So think of like a little bifold door. The stock is pretty thin, maybe 3/8 of an inch thick, and the hinges that I'm using to connect the 2 sides together, basically the hinge leaf is the same width as the thickness of the stock. So instead of having a U-shaped little pocket for the hinge, it's just straight all the way across. So I found that when I was attaching the hinges to these 2 little panels, it was really hard to register the hinges along the thickness of the stock. And the first time I tried it, it was a little bit off, and it just bugged the crap out of me. So I pulled the hinges off and realized on one of the panels, the hinges were actually pretty well aligned, so I left those as is. And I remembered a trick Bob Van Dyke told me about. He learned it from Harold Ianson, who was a fantastic Federal period furniture maker back in the day. And what he would do when he was hinging boxes to make sure the top and bottoms were perfectly aligned is he would actually glue the hinges in place. I think with some 5-minute epoxy, that's what I ended up using. And then once that was dry, you'd go ahead and screw the hinges in place once they were glued in place. So I had the hinges attached to one panel. I applied some 5-minute epoxy to the opposite panel, hinge mortises, slid everything together on a flat surface to register the 2 panels flush with each other, waited for the glue to dry, and then I just drilled right through the hinge holes and screwed the hinges in place. And it worked perfect. Worked really well. Otherwise, it just would have been a horribly tedious process to try and retry to get those hinges right in the right place.
And it gave you more time to make toast.
Well, it was all, the toast was toasting.
had
while
you
this was
already
done.
done the finish before you attached the hinges?
What? Yes, I pre-finished the sides, so they're little open panels. And in the opening for each panel, I'm filling out with a little kumiko, of course.
Kumiko.
Yes.
Kumiko.
Mike, do you like to do kumiko?
This is the 3rd project I've used it on. So I'm not tired of it yet. In fact, I have a 4th project slated for kumiko as well.
Kumiko sourdough toast.
That's
I think,
right.
Yeah, I think that's next.
It's gonna be at Mike's little coffee house / pastry bistro.
Well, what I want to do is I want to make up a little Kumiko square panel, put that in the toaster along with the toast, and it will protect the toast. And so that when you pull it out, you'll have this little white gridwork pattern on the toast itself.
I want to see that.
That'd be nice.
I really do. All right.
Yeah. Wonderful, Mike.
Let's move on from toaster. Our last question comes from Greg Zank. I don't know if that's his name or his code name. He says, I'm looking to downsize, become more portable with a smaller saw than my old Delta contractor saw. I'd like to avoid remaking a number of jigs I've made over the years using the saw. Perfect for me would be to see what is available where the miter slot where the miter slot to the right is 5.5 inches from the blade,
Yeah.
and to the left 4 3/8 from the blade. Wow. These values seem hard to find on the manufacturer's website. Anyone know how to get at these measurements? It seems like he's working backwards, and he might as well just restart. Don't you
Yeah,
think?
I was going to say, if you had said, I just made a bunch of brand new jigs for table saw and I don't want to remake them, I would say, okay, maybe this is consideration. But if you said you made some jigs over the years for your
Right.
saw, you're getting a new saw.
You're
Nothing better than spending an afternoon making a new crosscut sled,
Yeah.
making a new whatever dovetail jig sled or little whatever. Make some new jigs.
Get some freshness.
Yeah.
But also another consideration here, which he may not realize, is that he has a contractor saw, and he says he wants to get to something smaller. That means job site saw. All right.
Okay.
Job site saws may not have T-slots or slots that are even the same dimensions as a contractor saw.
Good point.
True.
So it may be completely irrelevant, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah,
And
get the saw you like.
Yeah.
Don't buy a saw based on the miter slot dimension.
Right.
You could be
Yes.
throwing out the baby with the bathwater there.
This is a standard type of answer from us.
Go big. No.
No, is that someone emails in with a question, and instead of answering their question, we say you're asking the wrong question, which is essentially what we've just told them. It's like
Yeah.
you're thinking about this wrong. So
Right. And also, if you're talking about a crosscut sled, they're sort of hard to fit on a job site saw anyway. You don't have a whole lot of room in front of the blade, and you have very little room behind the blade. For
So you may want to
really
get a
nice-
little smaller, shallower crosscut sled
I
so
would
you're
think
not
so.
tipping all over the place.
Yeah.
right.
So I guess it also depends on what kind of work he's doing with the saw and what jigs work and what won't. So, yeah, just plan on remaking your jigs if you're buying a new saw.
Yeah. I mean, how many jigs could you possibly have?
Mike,
I don't know.
how many jigs do you have?
I've got let's say 3. I've got like 3 crosscut sleds, and I always keep the old ones and end up using those with dado blades and stuff. So, but really, I have one good first use crosscut sled that I use 90% of the time. I've got a little tall crosscut sled for cutting my dovetails with my dovetail blade, and then I've got a little tiny guy that I use for making miter boxes with some little Destaco hold downs, and that's about it.
I have 2 small crosscut sleds for box making. One of them is only for 90 degrees. The other one is 90 and 45 built into it. I have a big crosscut sled, which now is pretty much a dado sled.
Right. Mine too.
Yes.
And an extra table for Thanksgiving dinner.
I have another crosscut sled, which actually may not be set up anymore, but it had a really long fence. And I made it when I was making the shaker infield cupboard.
Okay.
And also made it so that the fence was on the front edge rather than the back edge because the parts were so wide that
Yeah,
if
that's
the
cool.
fence was on the back, I couldn't start it properly. So I had one like that. I might have taken that one apart, though. That's really, I guess I have
I've got one for the little spline miters to hold my box at 45 degrees.
I have got a
Simple
crosscut
cross.
and a spline miter box.
spline miters.
Yeah, splines
Come on,
are
get on board,
beautiful.
In
man.
other words, you have a tacky box jig.
Add strength and beauty
TBJ.
with spline miters.
I also once made a other jigs you could have that would be like I had a 10-inning. I made a homemade 10-inning jig which would clamp onto my miter miter
Gauge?
miter
Yes.
gauge. But of course, that's irrelevant because you could move it.
Sure.
Doot, doot, doot.
Yep.
Almost never use that though.
And you don't use the sound effect either.
A lot of my jigs,
that in my shop a lot.
instead of having the little guides on the bottom that ride in the slots, they're designed to be screwed to a miter gauge or 2 miter gauges.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll use the same jig if I go to teach, and the slots are in different places. So
Yeah.
that's another way to get around that.
Do you know if I know, Matt, you're a big fan of the pre-made runners for jigs?
Yes.
Do you know if they fit job site saws or the
I
job
have no
site saws?
idea.
I
Yeah.
thought they had shallower miter slots, but I'm not sure.
So I think it would vary depending on the job site saw. I wouldn't be surprised if the better ones actually had standard slots, but I just don't know off the top of my head. And when it comes to miter bars for jigs, sleds and stuff, there is no. I mean, just suck it up and buy some aluminum ones, and don't use wood ones anymore. Come into the 21st century.
Yeah, I think I got mine from Rockler. I got some long stock. I was able to cut it down and get a couple sleds out of that. I've used that for the last couple, and I like them. I don't think I would go back to wooden guides.
You can reuse them over and over
Yeah.
and again. You can always adjust them to fine tune
Yeah.
the fit to the slot.
Yeah.
And they don't expand and contract with the seasons like wood does.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you have it. All right. Hey, well, last time, we challenged our listeners to give us a funny answer to the purpose of the beveled end of an adjustable bevel gauge. And looks like we got a few doozies.
Yeah, I think we learned our lesson.
Not
We'll
to ask people
never
to be funny.
do this
Yeah.
again. Don't be funny.
Because as we all know, we're not funny.
No.
And,
We think we are.
The only thing worse than a woodworker without a sense of humor is one with a sense of humor.
All right. Well, here's a few samplings. Tucker Tuck writes, the purpose of the bevel gauge is quite simple. As an oracular device, I'm afraid to look that one up. It points to the area where the craftsman is most likely to make a mistake when cutting or milling.
You can ask me about the oracle at Delphi later and the role it played in Socrates' life, and I'll explain that to you.
Yeah, we'll do that off the air.
That's what I meant.
K Fleming writes, I believe that the real reason for the angle is to allow the tool to be used for killing zombies.
Okay.
That's interesting. Chipmaker 2 adds, Type 1 is bevel down, and the new version is bevel up. The bevel down was traditionally used by old woodworkers to scratch an itch in hard-to-reach parts of the body. The bevel up is a new concept that can be bought in various configurations and sold at inflated prices to young, affluent wannabe woodworkers that are just itching to own and possibly use hand tools.
No, that was a very good answer. I enjoyed that answer.
You enjoy that answer?
I did.
That was
How many
huge.
bevel up planes do you own, Mike?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. Ouch.
Now, I think we
three
got
of them are block planes.
we actually got a serious answer, and I think maybe this is right, but W.R. Pitts got serious with his answer, and he says, in my 1939 L.S. Starrett catalog, the bevel end is shown to be used for inside acute angle measurements.
I think the most important thing we could investigate about that answer is why do you own a 1939 Starrett catalog? I'm glad that you do, but why?
Well, I guess it's important to him.
Some people like to accumulate that kind of stuff.
Well, he must have a 1939 vintage Starrett bevel gauge.
Yeah.
Well, here we
But
go.
that's very similar to the answer I gave last week.
It was?
Yes, I said it was to get angles that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise.
I believe your full and complete answer was, it's something about angles.
Yes,
That
that's
was
what
what
I
he
said.
said.
He was
Yes.
He was in the ballpark.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Hand.
The winner of our Type On glue package is J Ross 827. Now, bear with us. This one is long. J Ross says the angle on the end of a sliding bevel gauge actually was not always present. It was not introduced until the mid-18th century by a team of German woodworker-turned-toolmakers Matthias von Kennischnitzel and Mikhail Ustenhausen das Pekovic. Wow. Matthias was in charge of manufacturing of baby furniture and an oddly substantial amount of small boxes, while Mikhail was in charge of assembly and finishing. During glue-ups of the tiny pieces, Mikhail could not get his meaty schnitzel-sized fingers inside the boxes to clean up the glue squeeze out. So he had an idea when looking at his sliding bevel gauge on the workbench next to him. He thought if he cut an angle on the end of it, it would fit perfectly into the small crevices of the furniture, so he could scrape away the excess glue. They immediately started manufacturing this new design, and it was an instant success. Other notable items to come from this team are blue-colored joinery tape, water locks, Rogaine, and flocking. What's flocking?
Flocking was an early version of Rogaine, by which you would put glue on your head and then put the flocking on it and make it look like hair.
So like a chia pet thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Well-
You don't know what flocking is?
I really don't know what flocking is.
It's the classy way to line bands on boxes.
Wait a minute. No evaluations of its worth.
It's a legitimate and time-tested method for adding a little bit of beauty and comfort to the inside of a box.
Beauty and comfort.
Beauty and comfort.
You spread glue on some surface, and then it's kind of like a pool table felt, but it's a bunch of little dusty particles, and it gets glued down, and then you just kind of knock off the stuff that doesn't get glued down, and you have a little velvety surface.
Sounds fun.
Yes.
Anyway, Jay Ross will be in touch and get you out this glue. Meanwhile, that's it for this week's Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks on November 20th for our next episode. In the meantime, let us know what you think by leaving a comment on iTunes. And don't forget to give us the most valuable 5-star rating. If you have any woodworking questions, send them as well as your comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on your computer at www.shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Thanks for listening. Have fun in the shop. Until next time. See you guys.
I'm brand new to the Instagram. If you go to my Instagram page, you can see my toaster. I posted a picture of it.